I am 81 years old, and living alone taught me something I was not prepared to learn. The hardest part is not always the empty chair, the quiet telephone, or eating dinner without another voice in the room. Sometimes the hardest part is discovering how many people assumed you would always be strong, always be available, and always manage somehow. They love you, perhaps. But they return to their own homes, close their own doors, and continue with their lives. You are the one who remains when the house becomes silent. I once believed living alone would be simple. I imagined peaceful mornings, control over my time, and freedom from other people's demands. Some of that was true. There is a quiet dignity in arranging your day exactly as you please. But there are also nights when the silence feels heavier than the furniture. There are mornings when you wake from a bad dream and instinctively turn toward the other side of the bed, only to remember that no one is there. There are small problems that become frightening because there is no one nearby to say, "Do not worry, we will deal with it together." A strange noise downstairs, a light bulb you cannot reach, a letter you do not understand, a sudden pain that makes you wonder whether you should call someone or wait. Living alone takes ordinary moments and reveals what they truly contain. It shows you your courage, but it also shows you your fear. It teaches independence, but it also exposes how deeply human beings need connection. Old age teaches you quietly. It rarely announces its lessons. It places them in your kitchen, your bedroom, your telephone, and the long hours between evening and sleep. The first hard truth I learned was that independence can become pride if you are not careful. For years, I wanted to prove I could manage everything myself. I carried shopping bags that were too heavy. I climbed onto chairs to reach high shelves. I ignored small problems because I did not want to bother anyone. When family asked whether I needed help, I said, "No, I am fine." Sometimes I was fine. Sometimes I was simply afraid of becoming a burden. That fear is common among older people. We do not want our children to sigh when the phone rings. We do not want relatives discussing how much assistance we need. We do not want anyone deciding that we are no longer capable of living on our own. So we hide our difficulties. We say the house is easy to manage when it is becoming harder. We say we are eating well when dinner is sometimes a slice of bread and a cup of tea. We say we are not lonely when we have gone 3 days without a meaningful conversation. I believed asking for help would reduce my dignity. I was wrong. There is dignity in knowing your limits before those limits put you in danger. One afternoon I noticed that a curtain rail had come loose. It seemed like a small job. I could have called someone, but I told myself there was no need. I found a chair, climbed carefully, and reached above my head. The chair moved slightly beneath me. Nothing terrible happened. I stepped down in time. But for several minutes afterwards, I stood in the middle of the room imagining what might have happened. I imagined lying on the floor, unable to reach the telephone, because I had been too proud to ask for 10 minutes of help. That moment changed me. Independence does not mean doing everything alone. It means making wise decisions about what you can do safely and what should be shared. Now, when something is beyond my strength, I ask. I do not apologize for it. I do not give a long explanation. I simply say, I need help with this. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Asking for help before a crisis is wisdom, not weakness. The second hard truth was that loneliness does not always look like sadness. Sometimes loneliness looks like leaving the television on all day, not because you are watching it, but because you need another voice in the room. Sometimes it looks like taking longer in the shop because the cashier may be the only person who speaks to you that afternoon. Sometimes it looks like answering a call from someone who drains you because an unpleasant conversation still feels better than silence. I did not understand this until I was much older. I thought lonely people were always visibly unhappy. I thought they cried, complained, or begged others to visit. But many lonely older people appear perfectly capable. They dress themselves. They keep the house clean. They smile when asked how they are. Then they return home and speak aloud to an empty room. I have done that. I have described what I was cooking as though someone were listening. I have commented on the weather. I have laughed at something on the radio and then felt the laughter disappear because there was no one beside me to share it. Loneliness can make you question your importance. You begin wondering whether people would notice if you stopped calling first. You look at your telephone and realize that many conversations happen only because you begin them. And this is where many of us make the mistake. We wait for others to rescue us from loneliness. We tell ourselves that our children should call more, our friends should visit, or our relatives should remember us without being reminded. Perhaps they should. But waiting quietly while resentment grows does not create connection. It creates deeper isolation. I had to learn to take small responsibility for my own social life without turning every relationship into a test of who cared enough to call first. I began creating simple routines. I spoke regularly with one neighbor. I chose a particular day to telephone an old friend. I went outside even when I had nowhere important to go. I allowed brief conversations to matter instead of dismissing them because they were not deep or intimate. A few kind words at a shop, a wave from someone across the street, or a short conversation in the garden can help return a person to the world. Not every connection must become a close friendship to be meaningful. But I also learned not to accept poor treatment merely because I was lonely. Loneliness can make any open door look safe. It is not. Some people sense when an older person is hungry for company. They offer attention, then bring demands, criticism, gossip, or manipulation with them. A quiet home is painful at times, but it is still better than a home filled with disrespect. Do not invite chaos into your life simply because silence feels heavy. The third hard truth was that family love does not always appear in the form you hoped for. And this next one is painful because it often involves family. When children are young, your life revolves around them. You know their schedules, their fears, their favorite foods, and the sound of their footsteps in the hallway. You spend years being needed. Then they become adults. They have jobs, partners, children, obligations, and private worries they may not share with you. Their lives move quickly, while yours may become quieter. You may still think about them every day, but they may not think to call every day. That difference can hurt. I used to measure love by frequency. How often did they call? How long did they stay? Did they remember an appointment I mentioned? Did they notice that my voice sounded tired? When the answer disappointed me, I became quiet in the wrong way. I expected them to notice my silence and understand what it meant. Often, they did not. People cannot always read the pain hidden behind, "I am fine." Sometimes they are careless. Sometimes they are overwhelmed. Sometimes they assume that because you have always managed, you will continue to manage. Some people love you, but they do not know how to protect your heart. That does not excuse neglect. It does not mean older parents should accept being ignored indefinitely. But it does mean that disappointment must be handled honestly, not turned into a silent test. I learned to say, "I would like to hear from you more often," not accusingly, not with a list of sacrifices, just honestly. I also learned that no child, however loving, can fill every empty space in an older parent's life. That is too heavy a responsibility to place on one person. Children can be part of your support, but they cannot become your entire reason for waking up. They must be allowed to live without carrying constant guilt, and we must be allowed to ask for care without feeling ashamed. The balance is not easy. There were times I felt forgotten. There were also times I realized I had expected others to arrange their entire lives around a loneliness I had never clearly described. The memorable truth is this: love may remain even when attention becomes inconsistent. Look at patterns, not perfect behavior. Notice who returns after being busy. Notice who listens when you speak honestly. Notice who makes some effort, even if it is not exactly the effort you imagined. And when someone repeatedly shows that your feelings do not matter, stop begging for proof that you matter to them. You should not have to perform sadness to receive basic care. The fourth hard truth was that a quiet house can either protect your mind or slowly close it. Living alone gives you privacy. No one questions when you wake, what you eat, how long you sit by the window, or whether you speak to anyone all day. That freedom can be peaceful. It can also become dangerous if every day begins looking exactly like the one before it. I noticed myself becoming too comfortable with isolation. I stopped making an effort with my clothes because no one would see me. I delayed small household tasks because there was no one to notice. I ate at strange hours. I allowed entire days to pass without opening the curtains properly. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the problem. Life was becoming smaller so gradually that I almost did not notice. When you live with another person, their movement interrupts your habits. They ask questions. They suggest going somewhere. They notice if you are unusually quiet. When you live alone, no one interrupts the slow shrinking of your world. You must notice it yourself. But the hardest lesson came later. I realized that comfort and peace are not always the same thing. Comfort says, "Stay inside, do not make the effort." Peace says, "Take care of yourself, even when no one is watching." I began giving shape to my days, not a strict schedule. I had lived enough years by the clock. But I created small anchors. I opened the curtains each morning. I washed and dressed even when I expected no visitors. I ate meals at the table instead of standing at the kitchen counter. I stepped outside when the weather allowed. I gave one part of the day a purpose, even if that purpose was only watering plants, organizing a drawer, writing a letter, or walking to the end of the road. Routine became a form of self-respect. A person still deserves a cared-for life when no audience is present. Make the bed for yourself. Prepare a proper meal for yourself. Keep one room pleasant for yourself. You are not waiting for life to begin when someone visits. This is your life now, and it deserves attention. The fifth hard truth was that practical preparation matters more than pride. Living alone taught me to think about things I once preferred to avoid. Who has a spare key? Who would notice if I did not answer the telephone? Are important numbers easy to find? Can someone locate essential documents if I become unable to explain? These questions can feel uncomfortable because they remind us that independence has limits. But avoiding the questions does not protect us. It only leaves confusion for a difficult day. I once became unwell late at night. It was not a great emergency, but I felt frightened. I sat on the edge of the bed deciding whether to call anyone. I did not want to disturb my family. I did not want to sound dramatic. I kept telling myself to wait another 10 minutes. That night taught me how quickly pride can become fear when you are alone. Afterwards, I made a simple plan. I chose people I could contact. I kept important information where it could be found. I spoke honestly with family about what I wanted them to know. I made sure at least one trusted person checked in regularly. Preparation did not make me feel helpless. It made me feel calmer. There is a great difference between living independently and pretending nothing will ever go wrong. A wise person prepares without living in fear. You do not need to imagine every disaster. You simply need to make ordinary difficulties easier to handle. Keep commonly used things within safe reach. Do not hide important information so carefully that no trustworthy person can find it. Let someone know when you are going away. Have a plan for whom to call when you feel unsure. A peaceful home is not only quiet, it is prepared. The sixth hard truth was that memories can become companions, but they can also become traps. When you live alone, the past has more room to speak. An old song plays, and suddenly you remember a kitchen that no longer exists. You open a drawer and find a note written by someone whose handwriting you will never see again. You smell a familiar scent, and for 1 second, expect a person to walk into the room. Memory can be a beautiful visitor. It can also stay too long. There were evenings when I sat among old photographs and slowly made myself miserable. I remembered people when they were younger. I remembered arguments I wish I had handled differently. I remembered chances I did not take, apologies I delayed, and words I could not retrieve. Regret becomes louder in an empty room. There is no one beside you to interrupt it and say, "You did the best you could with what you knew then." So you must learn to say that to yourself. This does not mean excusing every mistake. I have made decisions I regret. I have hurt people without intending to. I have allowed pride to keep me silent when love required words. But guilt cannot be allowed to occupy every room in the house. The past is a place to visit, not a home to move back into. I began treating memory with more care. When a good memory came, I allowed myself to enjoy it without immediately mourning its ending. When regret came, I asked whether there was anything I could still repair. Could I apologize? Could I write? Could I change the way I behaved now? If the answer was yes, I tried. If the answer was no, I practiced releasing what could no longer be changed. This is not easy. Some regrets return again and again. But I have learned not to serve them tea and invite them to stay all evening. A memory can honor what was lost without destroying what remains. The seventh hard truth was that peace requires boundaries, even when you live alone. People may assume that because you live alone, you are always available. They may arrive without warning. They may call at any hour. They may ask you to take on responsibilities because they believe you have nothing else to do. Retirement and solitude can make other people treat your time as empty, but empty time is still your time. A quiet afternoon is not wasted simply because you are not completing a task for someone else. For years I felt guilty saying no. I thought, what excuse do I have? I am at home. But rest does not need an excuse. Privacy is not bitterness. It is wisdom. I learned to stop answering every call immediately. I asked visitors to telephone first. I stopped discussing private matters with people who turned my life into gossip. I said no to favors that left me exhausted or resentful. Some people did not like the change. They said I had become difficult. Perhaps I had become more difficult to use. There is a difference. Living alone does not mean your door must always be open. It does not mean your savings, home, time, or emotional energy are available to whoever asks. Your peace needs protection because no one else lives inside it with you. When a difficult visitor leaves, they return to their own life. You remain with the tension they brought into your home. That is why access matters. Not everyone who is lonely should be invited into your private world. Not everyone related to you should know every detail of your finances, worries, or plans. Not everyone who says they care has earned the right to advise you. You can be kind without being exposed. You can be generous without becoming easy to exploit. You can love people from a distance that protects your dignity. Sometimes dignity means walking away without proving your pain. The final hard truth was also the most surprising. Living alone taught me that solitude and abandonment are not the same thing. For a long time, every quiet evening felt like evidence that I had been left behind. I looked at families eating together, couples walking side by side, and homes filled with noise. I compared their visible togetherness with my private silence. I felt as though life was happening somewhere else, but appearances hide many things. A crowded home can still contain loneliness. A marriage can include years of emotional distance. A busy family can speak constantly without truly listening to one another. Being surrounded by people does not guarantee that you are known, and being alone does not mean you have no value. A quiet life is not an empty life. Slowly, I began noticing the gifts that lived beside the hardship. I could sit in silence without needing to satisfy anyone. I could choose which relationships entered my home. I could hear my own thoughts clearly. I could arrange my days around what gave me meaning rather than what others expected. I began to understand my own company. Not perfectly. There are still days when I want someone beside me. There are still meals that would taste better if shared. There are still nights when the house feels too large. But I no longer treat every moment of solitude as failure. Sometimes solitude is where the heart finally rests after a lifetime of noise. Living alone forced me to meet myself without the roles I had played for others. I was no longer only a parent, partner, worker, provider, helper, or problem solver. I was simply myself. That sounds easy, but it can be unsettling. When no one needs you at that moment, who are you? When the house is quiet, what do you enjoy? When there is no one to impress, what kind of life feels honest? These questions took time. I discovered that I still enjoyed simple things. Morning light on the wall, a well-made cup of tea, the sound of rain when I was warm inside, a familiar book, a short conversation with someone sincere, a plant producing a new leaf. These things did not replace human love. Nothing replaces love, but they reminded me that life was still speaking, even in a quieter voice. At 81, I have learned that living alone requires courage, but not the kind people usually praise. It is the courage to admit when you need help, the courage to call someone before loneliness becomes despair, the courage to build routines when no one is watching, the courage to prepare for difficult moments without allowing fear to rule every day, the courage to remember the past without living inside it, the courage to protect your home from people who disturb your peace, and the courage to believe that your life still has worth, even when fewer people witness it. I no longer pretend living alone is always peaceful. Sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it is frightening. Sometimes it reveals disappointments I would rather not face. But it has also made me more honest. I know now that strength is not silence at all costs. Strength is saying, I need someone today. Strength is keeping your own company without believing you have been forgotten. Strength is creating warmth in a home where only one person lives. Strength is accepting that some people will not show up as you hoped, then building a life that does not collapse around their absence. If you live alone, do not disappear inside your own house. Open the curtains. Answer the kind voice. Ask for help before you are desperate. Keep something in your week that brings you into contact with the world. Protect your peace, but do not build walls so high that love cannot reach you. Let trustworthy people know the truth, not every detail, not every fear, but enough to allow them to care. And when the silence feels heavy, remind yourself that silence is not proof that you are unloved. It may simply be the place where you must learn to love your own life more carefully. I am 81, and living alone taught me these hard truths. Independence needs humility. Loneliness needs honest action. Family love needs realistic expectations. A quiet home needs routine. Safety needs preparation. Memory needs boundaries. Peace needs protection. And solitude needs meaning. I once believed living alone meant learning how not to need anyone. Now I know better. It means learning whom to trust, when to ask, what to protect, and how to remain connected without surrendering yourself. The strongest older person is not the one who never needs help. It is the one who knows that dignity and dependence can exist together. We all need someone sometimes, and even when no one is sitting beside us, we still owe ourselves care. If you live alone, or if you have learned these lessons in your own way, share your age in the comments. Tell me which truth has been the hardest for you, and whether solitude has brought you more peace, more pain, or a little of both.